Life after narcissistic abuse for scapegoat survivors. Freedom to be disappointed. Do you wonder what life looks and feels like when narcissistic abuse is in your rearview mirror? Do you feel like you are in a straitjacket in close relationships? Do you only find it safe to tell people what you appreciate about them as opposed to what you do not appreciate? Well, scapegoat survivors may benefit from knowing what life is like when the impacts of the abuse no longer dominate. And one of the outcomes of recovery can be the freedom to know and express what you do not like, as well as what you like about how you are treated. This is especially important in relationships with people who matter to you. In today's video, I explain how the scapegoat child was forbidden to know what they did not like about their narcissistic parent. Next, I'll explain how the therapeutic relationship can help scapegoat survivors safely access and express all of their experience. My name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in helping survivors of narcissistic abuse reclaim the quality of life they deserve. And I want to let you know about a new opportunity to further your recovery from such abuse. It's called the Rise and Reclaim Healing Toolkit for Scapegoat Survivors. And in it, you'll receive my book called Growing Up as the Scapegoat Child to Narcissistic Parents, A Guide to Healing, and a worksheet that offers a structured approach to organizing your recovery process, focusing on key areas of healing each month. And finally, you also receive the Quick Guide to Recovery from Narcissistic Abuse, which offers a concise, easy to follow guide that outlines the essential steps to start your recovery and regain control of your life. And you can find the link to the toolkit in the description box below. The mandate to only like what you see. A narcissistic parent devalues, deprives, and controls their scapegoat child. They may do this to manage their own core feelings of worthlessness. If the scapegoat child believes they deserve such mistreatment, then the parent can see that child as the worthless one instead of themselves. At the same time, the child must convince themselves to keep seeking closeness to this parent. Biology has imprinted upon children that this is the surest way to survive infancy and childhood. During these phases of life, we are exquisitely vulnerable. We cannot feed, protect, nor care for ourselves. We need a caring adult to provide these things for us. Failure is not an option. So if a parent happens to be narcissistic and has to mistreat their child to feel better about themselves, then so be it. The child will find a way to take the mistreatment and stay close to that parent. An abusive narcissistic parent also expects their child to hold them in high regard. And this prevents the child from getting to settle into their own feelings. The child must develop the capacity to curate what feelings they experience and express. The guiding principle is to only know and express feelings of admiration and gratitude towards the parent. The inner hook. The internal life of the scapegoat child can seem like there is always a hook that pulls them away from what they actually feel. The child is conditioned to get anxious when they feel anything but the allowable feelings towards the narcissistic parent. So when they get closer to a feeling of, say, disappointment in the parent, the child's anxiety can really kick in. The effect is like having a hook come in and lift the child out of their organic feelings and into a forced but much less dangerous feeling. This keeps the child safe, but leaves them with an ongoing sense of dis-ease within. Nothing ever seems settled. The resulting constriction. The mandate to only feel one way towards the parent forces the scapegoat child to disavow all of their contrary feelings. This fiction results in the false impression that the narcissistic parent is incapable of failing the child. Other people in the world can and do, but not the parent, or so the logic goes. The parent may even like to hear how others fail the child, while the parent remains perfect in the child's eyes. The scapegoat child has to see all the connection they need to exist in the parent. Everyone else is inferior and too fallible. The child can be left in orbit around the parent and reluctant to prioritize relationships outside of the family. If you must see the negative, then find it in yourself. The scapegoat child's negative feelings towards the parent may have to get disguised as self-criticism. Since they must keep the parent perfect at all costs, they may have to become their own target. The child may freely scrutinize and devalue what they find as faults in and about themselves. Of course, this mimics how their parent treats them, a feature that can help the child continue to be who the parent will recognize them as. Why it stays this way. The scapegoat child's zone of safe experience does not include their feelings of disappointment in their parent. So when a child is forbidden explicitly or implicitly from sharing fundamental aspects of themselves to their parent, then they associate these feelings with going unrecognized. The child may feel a sense of darkness and desolation if they approach these forbidden feelings. Put a different way, acknowledging negative feelings towards the parent can lead to the danger of being nobody to no one. To avoid these impossible outcomes, the scapegoat child may develop unconscious beliefs that reinforce their parent's perfection and the child's own inadequacy. These beliefs benefit the child and later the scapegoat survivor by keeping them away from that nobody to no one state. However, they get in the way of the scapegoat survivor's ability to fully be themselves. Well, let's look at how this played out in the life of Stan, an anonymized and fictional client. Stan was a 28-year-old man who worked as a landscaper in the suburban town he grew up in. He was a crew foreman who took orders from his father, also the company's owner. Stan's familiar reflex with his father was to think of him as a good man. He might have to tense up within to believe this thought, though. What someone else might see about his father, if they could see him through a different pair of eyes, is a man who was very quick to anger and intolerant of imperfection in others. He routinely berated his employees, including Stan, for not doing what he supposedly expected of them. Stan was used to this, though. As a kid, he had to overlook his father's yelling at him for what seemed like minor offenses. Stan insisted to himself that his father was a good guy who was only trying to make Stan a better person. Stan's inner life, however, grew to feel very uncomfortable. He could not rest easy with his experience as it emerged. Something very influential within told him to only think and feel in upbeat ways. He quite literally could not think depressing thoughts, no matter how realistic they might be. So, for example, Stan got little of the attention he needed from his father, and this left him in a state of consistent deprivation and felt depressing. But he could not name the reason for these feelings. They were just there, and he had to go on insisting that all was well in his life and with his father. On the job, Stan found himself in conflict with the rule that he always see his father positively. Some of the other guys in his crew would openly grumble about his father's abusive practices. At lunch, they would sit in the cab of Stan's truck and eat what they had packed for themselves. One day, a crew member named Frederic said, "Dang, I asked for next Friday off to go to my niece's graduation ceremony, and your father yelled at me." Stan instantly tensed up. The conversation was going in a direction he found impossible to go in. Another crew member, Terry, said, "I know, man, that guy did the same thing to me when I asked for a day off to see my grandmother in the hospital. He said I was trying to take advantage of his kindness. I mean, what? I've worked here 3 years and never asked for a day off. Didn't seem to matter to him one bit." Stan did not know what to do nor say. At that point, he could not safely know what he really thought about his father. These other guys obviously could. Stan did not want to seem like an apologist for his father at the same time. He was extremely anxious and thankful when the lunch hour ended. Freedom to say what you see. If we think of one eye seeing what is good in the other, and the other eye seeing what is not so good, then scapegoat survivors must wear a psychological eye patch over their latter eye when it comes to their parent. This requires contortions that used to keep the tie to the narcissistic parent in place. Today, having to be blind to the faults of another leaves the survivor feeling inferior to them. The mandate to only see what you like about the other person might be thought of as an unconscious belief. Scapegoat survivors have to live as if this belief is true in order to avoid the predicted danger of losing the other's willingness to be connected to them. Survivors can use therapy, though, to test and hopefully disconfirm this belief with their therapist. When their therapist presents evidence that they do not expect to be found perfect, nor expect their clients to be perfect, the scapegoat survivor can find the relationship to be safer. Peeking out from under the eye patch will not ruin the connection. Just as the scapegoat survivor feels freer in the relationship, so they can feel freer within. Over time, survivors can access a space within where they are not forced to only think positively. They can now entertain what they find negative, and this can lend a greater sense of realness to themselves, to others, and to the world. Negative experiences and outcomes do in fact happen, are safe to acknowledge and even expect. This is a more accurate map of how life works and can lead the survivor feeling like a more authentic person. As it becomes safer to see their therapist as a whole person, the scapegoat survivor may have to be less critical towards themselves. It is no longer necessary to siphon off their critical thoughts of the other and direct those thoughts towards themselves. This type of transformation in therapy also busts the myth that anyone is perfect. The result is that the survivor is free to see everyone as capable of offering valued relationship. And that does not have to mean that they will be flawless in doing so. But since there is now a way to honestly and safely negotiate moments when these flaws do show up, they still have much value to offer. And this means that there no longer has to be one perfect person, a la the narcissistic parent, who is singularly perfect. Well, let's go back to Stan again to illustrate. Eventually, Stan's wife urged him to seek therapy. He was having trouble sleeping due to worrying about his performance at his job. His wife saw how much Stan's father was stressing him out, but knew that Stan would have difficulty hearing this. She hoped that therapy might allow Stan to see his father more realistically so that Stan might feel less beholden to him. So Stan reluctantly agreed and was surprised to find that he liked his therapist. He found her to be easy to talk to, non-judgmental, and warm. His therapist inferred that Stan held an unconscious belief that he deserved rejection if he does not find the other person to be perfect. And as usually happens in therapy, she expected Stan to bring this belief into the treatment to see if it was still accurate. And here's how he did so. His therapist typically tried to understand Stan's experience as he spoke, then reflect back to him her understanding of it. Occasionally, Stan would feel judged by what she said. For example, Stan described how difficult it was for him to have dinner with his father, that even when his father was not actively berating him, Stan felt on edge. And his therapist said, so he still has a lot of influence over you. Stan's reflex was to nod, deny any sense of anger or hurt he felt, and force himself to be grateful that she seemed to be listening to him. But something did not feel good about what she said. As he thought about it in the week until their next session, he realized that he felt put down by her. It seemed like she was highlighting how he had not come far enough when he was hoping for affirmation for his growing awareness of how his father has affected him. He very much feared offending his therapist, but also did not think he could honestly participate in the upcoming session with this going unspoken. So Stan said, "Hey, I was thinking about last week when you said my dad still has a lot of influence over me. And I wonder, what did you mean by that?" And his therapist said, "Yes, I remember. I'm happy to share, but can you first tell me what you thought about what I said?" And Stan said, "Well, I had the reaction that I had not done enough to get your approval or something with how I'm handling things with my dad. I'm sure that's not how you meant it, but I guess that's how I felt." And after a moment of reflection, she said, "Well, no, I think you got it. This is something I know about myself. At times, I will look at a situation and see what I think is missing, then comment on that. It's something I've done throughout my life, and you are telling me that it had a real negative impact on you last session." Stan was shocked that she was validating his perception of her falling short with him instead of trying to defend herself. He felt convicted in his own perception and judgment of her, and reassured that being honest with this person would not lead to catastrophe. We could say that Stan tested his unconscious belief that he must find the other perfect or face rejection with his therapist. This is a good example of how a new relationship can afford conditions of psychological safety that make it possible to test out and disconfirm the rules that had to be adopted in order to survive a narcissistic parent. Well, if you consider yourself to be a scapegoat survivor and can relate to kind of having to make all of your expressions, particularly in close relationships, be sort of half-baked on the side of positivity, then I hope you may have found today's video helpful. And with that, I want to thank you for watching today's video and for your continued support of this channel and the resources that surround it, and participation in the community. I guess I'm thinking of in the comments section too. There's just wonderful support to see offered to one another, and really, I think, brave and helpful stories and suggestions that I always see in the comments section each week. So with that, I look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.